Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, and we have a special guest. I'm going to have her introduce herself to you all.
Yeah, my name is Rikimah Glymph, and I'm super excited to be here.
Yay, I'm excited to have you. So Rikimah is someone who is originally from California and no longer there, but it sounds like you've been adjusting to the weather. What would you say the big difference is being on the West Coast and coming to the East Coast? What do you miss the most?
Probably the weather.
Okay.
Probably the weather. I mean, admittedly, like I'm a person who loves the seasonal changes. For me, when I witness seasonal changes, when I feel it sends a signal into my body, it's time to do something different, right? When I was in California, I never had that. So I left California when I was 24. Threw myself a big old party. Everybody thought I was like, I must have been having a milestone birthday. Something was going on because I'm throwing like the biggest shebang ever. The next day, I hopped on a plane with 2 bags and did not go home. I came to DC, didn't look back, hadn't been back since. And people ask me, like, what was that about? I'm like, I didn't want you guys to deter me and tell me no. I didn't want y'all to give me all the 50 reasons why the East Coast wasn't for me. You know, I follow my own spirit and my own mind around like where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing. So I ascended upon the DMV area with no friends, no business connections, no cousins, no nothing. Like it literally was me and everybody else over here. And for the first year, I think maybe a year or two after, they got Snowmageddon down here, and I was like, "What the whole world did I walk into?" Because of course, anybody who knows Southern California, it's like sunny all the time, right? They have a song, "It never rains in Southern California."
Yeah.
But then I got to the East Coast, and it was like not rain; it was like snow, and it was like not just snow, the kind of snow where delivery trucks weren't getting in food and stuff. So like, I'm shopping at the local gas station because I am a newbie and had no idea that you needed to be prepared because the East Coast gets that kind of weather.
Yeah.
So I am adjusting, but admittedly, you know, in the last year or two, I've literally said to myself, Rikimah, like, for the Gemini that you are, let's put that out there too. For, you know, the way in which you need visual reminders and cues for your learning curve in the world, when the season changes, it signals a thing to you. So as the spring was coming, I felt something in my spirit be like, whoa, here we go. Because all the trees started blooming and stuff.
Yeah.
It went from brown to like reds and oranges. And I have the same sensation in the fall. And I find that I start making big changes and big moves every time I get these indicators. So I think psychologically and emotionally, like spiritually, I think I'm connected to seasonality.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I want to just point out something that you said around like, I knew that I was going to move and this was a decision I made, and I was mindful not to share it with everyone because I didn't want to feel deterred. I think that's a message for somebody. Throughout my conversations with people, I try to pull out messages, and I think sometimes people are constantly looking for validation or looking for to hear people's opinions. And when you have a relationship with spirit, with yourself, like, you know, a lot of times people don't have that relationship and don't know how to trust themselves. So just kind of being mindful. I think it's a reminder for people to be mindful on who your audience is. Because if you're trying to be an entrepreneur and you're sharing with somebody that's worked 30 years at a company and did well and retired, they're going to be like, no, that's crazy. But they're talking from their experience. So really being mindful, or somebody that's only lived in California their entire life can never imagine living anywhere else. They're going to deter you, not because they're hating on you, but because they don't really know any difference. So really being mindful of your audience is a huge takeaway from what you just shared.
I think that's right. I mean, I tell my son all the time, you're the company you keep. And usually if I'm hanging out, it's with purpose. He tells me all the time, I never see you like, you know, hanging out with like just BFFs and stuff like that. And I'm like, listen, my BFFs know what I'm about. They know what I'm about, like trying to get on purpose. And these are not friends who need to hear from me every day.
Every day, yeah.
I up with them in a year from now because of who I am, who they are. We understand that that's our vibration, is that we are connected, but we don't have to talk all the time. So I tell him, hey, hang out with people who are doing better than you. Make sure you hang out with people who have the things that you're looking for, you know, what you want to do, because for who we are in the world, there's a lot of information we're locked out of. There's a lot of information we don't get. So if I'm only hanging out, like you said, to your point, in LA on the beach, and I'm around folks who are not political, who don't think about the world in that lens, who are really consumed, I think, what is it means to be LA and California. Then when the world starts to do what it does and life starts to start life in, I think that's where they're pulling from. Instead, now I'm the person who people call. Well, you've been all over the world. Well, Rikimah, you are a single parent. Well, Rikimah, you've built your career on your own. You are a first time for all in your family, right? First to go to college, first to own multiple homes, first to, right? Like there's all these first to go to all these countries. Give us some feedback. What do you think? What do you think? And so I do think that like that's important, like the ability to step outside of self and to say, let me challenge myself to do something different. It's only served me. Even when I talk to my dad now, sometimes I'll say, well, that makes sense because you were born and raised in California. You only moved to the East Coast. Right? But as a person who's been to over 100 countries and as a person who has worked nationally and internationally and on the back ends of all these types of organizations, let me tell you what I've seen. Let me tell you what I think. And then somewhere in the middle is where we land.
Yeah. And I love that. And even like I had you talking to your dad and explaining stuff, there's stuff that he may not get. And I think people get so frustrated with those people that don't understand them. And because you understand yourself and because you're it sounds like you're very comfortable with being by yourself. And a lot of people aren't, but that's where you find yourself. If you're looking for yourself in everything and everyone else, I think people don't understand how you're never going to really understand your identity. Right. And it sounds like you have a really good sense of your identity, which is why
it's taking some time.
Yeah.
And it was also scary.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in an environment where it was just me all the time.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the bigger fight now is trying to make sure I don't turn into an extreme introvert because I've gotten so comfortable with the idea of being with self. And I say the extreme introvert because what I recognize is that there are a lot of forces out there that don't want to see people thriving.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate part, right? Like
America.
Right. Like they used to be like misery loves company. And so you'd be like, all right, misery, I'm cool on you. Right. But then you say, even people who say they love you, even people who you don't doubt if they love you, but you say, but because of your lack of experience or because of your challenge, your journey in life, right? Everybody's got their journey.
Yeah.
You're struggling to support or to validate or to celebrate me even. Right.
Yeah.
So now I have to reflect on myself and say, Rikimah, how does it make you feel? That no one to support or no one to celebrate. Like, does that hurt your feelings? And if it does, you should model that for people. And also, like, what do you need in order for you to be okay, knowing that you're not going to get all of that, whatever that thing is, right? And if you wish you had it, but you don't, how can you show the next generation what that looks like so that they can try to normalize it a little bit, right? So my son, even for the littlest things, I'm like, all right now. But if he does something basic like make his bed, I'm like, all right, son, let's talk. I'm not going to celebrate you with this bed making up, okay? This is the bare basic. And I explained it to him as like, this is what we do for ourselves.
Yeah.
You making your bed, you brushing your teeth, you feeding yourself. This is about self.
That's
so
self-love.
That's right. So if you're going to remind yourself every day that you are worthy of these things and that you love yourself more than anything, right? You love yourself because I'm telling him I love you more than anything.
Yeah.
I need you to love you more than anything. And there's nothing I'm going to say to help you with your esteem in the inside.
Yeah.
Because you're already at an age where you're making things up for yourself now. Right?
Yeah.
But I say, but you need to do these things for you. If you want to work out, don't work out because you're into girls now. Work out because your body requires it. Work out because you like the way you feel, the way you look when you look in the mirror.
The values,
too, right?
Yeah. I want to, because I want to ask you a little bit about your upbringing. I'm gonna put a pin right here, because I do want to go back to how much is being a Black woman in America play a role in some of the things you talked about, which I know to be true. But tell people a little bit about your upbringing, being raised in California. Sounds like it was multiple people in the home.
Yeah. So originally, I am from a big family of 6 kids. I am number 4. And so imagine that. Just close your eyes for a second. There's a child that is 4 years above me and 5 years below me.
Oh, there's a huge gap.
Like middle.
Yeah.
Right? So from a young age, I always kind of felt like a lone ranger. That was the thing. I was always a bit of a black sheep because I'm always the one who's saying, that's not right. Stop. That's not okay. I don't like that. Now ask me where it came from. The good Lord. That's it.
Yeah, you're wise at a young age.
I don't know where it came from. But because of that, at about maybe 10, 11 years old or so, I ended up going through a whole lot of stuff and ended up living with my father instead. And so, and that was all based on, you know, the way that I was responding to what was around me. Drugs around me, right? Living in the projects, which was tough because there was a lot of stuff, including being followed from the bus stops, running, stumbling upon, you know, deceased bodies, all kinds of craziness.
So your nervous system was used to being in this like flight or fight mode like all the time. And as kids were, you know, as Rikima's talking, I just want to point out for people that are parents, because a lot of times we'll look at their behavior but not understand where it stems from, and we get so bogged down in the behavior. And obviously your hindsight, you're looking back and recognizing a lot of the things is because of what you were going through. So I just want parents to understand that, because even if it's not like they're in the projects or seeing bodies, there could be other things happening that they may not have language for. And even as Rikimah was saying earlier, asking herself, like, how does this make me feel? Like, I had to learn that as an adult. I should have been thinking about that as a child, but sometimes growing up in our community, feelings are never part of the conversation. So instead of you acknowledging your feelings, you've been reacting off of that with your behaviors, right?
Right. That's right. Okay. I mean, imagine that, right? Like my parents didn't have the words either.
Right.
My mother was the one who was strung out on drugs. My father was stressed trying to figure out how to save his children. You know, and so the reality is, like, as I got older, I found myself saying they had their own walk in this world, their own walk with God. That had nothing to do with me. And I, you know, I believe that, you know, kids choose parents the way that parents choose kids in the womb, right? So like for me, I'm like, I think there was a going throughness that was going to be present. And to your point, it required a lot of, I think, acting out on my part as a kid. Because I definitely was very mouthy. No, y'all are going to stop this mess, right? So anyway, so when I went to go stay with my father, there was a lot of quietness in the house. So it went from being out of pocket, just violence and a lot of noise and a lot of stuff going on, because I had older siblings who were involved with all the things. I mean, everything you can imagine, gangs, youth pregnancies, all the things. And so we talk about cycles, right? And then I went to my father's house, which he was always at work, and it was like quiet. I was always by myself.
That was scary, probably, because you weren't used to it.
It was alarming because one, I was always like, well, what does this mean? Right? Like, I think as a kid, I had summed it all up by saying, this is the atomic family. This must be what people go through. Like, so maybe this is what love looks like. Maybe this is what healthy experiences look like. And then I did the polar opposite, which is my dad's Buddhist sort of Zen environment. You know, he got trees all over the wall, and, you know, like, what is going on?
Logically, it's kind of like, well, it's better, Rikimah. Why wasn't that okay? But you don't understand, when your system is used to one way, trying to introduce a new way is really hard. It's so hard.
That's right. So he did a lot of talking to me as a kid, you know, about his perspective. This is what I think is wrong. This is what I think is right. It turns out I'm a little bit more liberal than my father is. And I always tell him that he saved my life, because where it was going at that time when I was coming up versus where it ended up going is night and day. But what I'll tell you is that from having those extreme differences in my world, it put me, by the time I was about 16 years old, I knew what wasn't going to work for me and what was going to work for me. Why? Because I said, these are not my kind of people to be around. And so there is a choice. And I recognize as younger kids, we don't have a lot of agency in that. But as a bigger person, as an almost adult person, I'm now going to tell you that if it looks like violence and smells like violence, I'm out. If it looks like drugs and drinking, I'm out, right? Because it's coming from a place of trauma all of a sudden, right? Where it's like, these are things that hurt me in my youth. I don't want no parts of it, right? Then you say, all right, well, so I'm going off to college, right? And when I was away, there was an issue that happened in college where I realized, maybe after year one, I went to UCLA. After year one, I was like, oh my gosh, there's only 1% Black people here. And so then it was like, it wasn't just about, you know, like previous, what you grew up in. It's also like, now as an adult, I'm being like force-fed this experience right now where I am an other in an environment. Go ahead.
When you lived with your dad, were you still around Black people?
I was.
Oh, okay. So going
Absolutely.
to UCLA, it was a huge difference. And so
That's
with
right.
you kind of being so wise and knowing what you want, even though you were probably doing better than most people you grew up with, it's still, you were able to notice that this isn't okay. That's interesting how you were still able to notice that.
Oh yeah. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I mean,
Okay.
and going to UCLA was an act of defiance also, because I was told that nobody was paying for college and I shouldn't go.
Oh,
So for me, again, when I talked about those early choices, there were choices that were being made along the way that was like, my spirit said, though, I'm supposed to be out here. So I'm gonna have to figure it out.
did people think you were better than them? People in your lives, like, did they think you were being like white? You know, I'm using that in quotation marks because I
Oh
know
yeah.
sometimes. Okay,
Oh yeah.
and what? Because that happened with me. But like, what made you? Do you feel like because you were firm in your identity and what you want, that didn't deter you from the direction you were going? I'm just
Yeah.
asking these questions for my audience that may be in the
Yeah.
same boat.
No, I'm here for this. No, I realized that two things. One, misery likes misery. Okay. Like that's it. When you see me happy, you're going to reach for anything because you're struggling to be satisfied with me or happy for me because you're not happy. So that was one for me. Right. The other one is I stopped caring. I mean, literally, Celeste, I literally stopped caring. I said, you know what? If I gave $1 for every time somebody said something bad to me, right? I mean, I also grew up, as a teenager who came out as LGBT. And that was hard because my father could not accept it. I mean, that was part of the decision. I'm out of here. This ain't open enough for me. These guys, I don't know about this, right? And as much as I love my dad, he was not open to the differences that I was starting to show as a younger youth, right? So by the time I get to college and it's super white and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm lost. You were lost on campus, you were lost with your community. The community is like, there they go over there being like these guys. Those guys are like, y'all ain't qualified to be here, so why are you here in the first place? Right? Graduate from there because I was like, but I'll be darned, and y'all are not going to be the people who are going to dictate my future. So, right, you hear the attitude that's been present all along, which is like, no, you got to know where I'm coming from to know where I'm headed. Because if this little thing, like y'all coming for me about how woke I am or all of these things, if that turns out to be the thing that completely knocks me off, what was all the other stuff about then? Right? I'm coming out of drugs. I'm coming out of violence. I'm coming out of sisters being violated. I'm coming out of houses being swatted. I'm coming out of a broken home. You saying I'm whitewashed is nothing on my skin. Not if I'm never going back there, right? Like, and so it really was about a decision to say nothing is going to stop me from getting to this next place, and it's going to be hard. And I'm aware of that, and I was praying a lot. God, cover me, because I got a lot of thick skin. I've been through a lot of them, cried a lot of them, whatever, and I got to get through this. Why? And it took me a couple years to figure the why part out, which was, it wasn't just about not going back. It was because I recognized that everybody had kids around me and that there was another generation watching. And I was petrified that if I didn't at least do my part to show that there was a different way of being and existing in the world, that it would just give the green light for another generation to do the same types of stuff.
Wow. Wow.
So then I said, it's on me. I'm going to college, not for me. I'm going to college for this next generation. Wow. Because even though my sisters still don't talk to me. They say she thinks she's all that. Meanwhile, I give everything to everybody. I don't know, right? Yeah. But I have come to terms with it because I recognize that people are on their journeys. And the same way you can't stop me from finishing my journey is the same way I can't stop you in whatever your journey looks like, right?
Wow, that's powerful. I just want to pause for a second because I know that when sometimes like you are clear on your calling and where you were going, and I think sometimes people are clear, but the idea of losing people, where nobody talks about grieving the loss of people that are still on earth, but you don't have a relationship with, and I just want to name that for people that may be on this journey and the direction they're going is different than what, you don't want to come off as. When I started my practice in 2016, I didn't even want my picture on the website because I'm like, I don't want people to think I'm better than them. Like I went through that cycle and And what Rikimah is saying is what I had to do, because we have to understand just how powerful the mind is. Like it can go it's going to go in a direction. And so if I start to accept this is who people are, and I recognize that, and that's why I don't hold any anger or anything against people, because I recognize, because people don't see it for themselves, they have a hard time seeing it for me, and that's not my problem.
That's right.
And I always tell people, there's been so many studies, and people on their deathbed, the one thing they regret is caring about what other people thought. Because I get that it's hard to continue to do what you're doing when you don't have the validation or support, but it's even harder living a life that is underrepresented of what you are capable of, right? I think trying to understand that perspective will help you be uncomfortable with, the naysayers, because you don't want to live a life where your spirit and your mind and body knows you're capable of so much more. So even Rikimah sharing this part, but I want to hold space and recognize that it wasn't easy emotionally to do that. Because a lot of times, like when people like you and I talk, and I don't want people to think like, oh, well, it's just easy for you. It's hard for all of us, but you got to pick your hard.
That's
You
right.
know what I mean?
Right. And also work through it, right? Work through it.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me years to understand how I managed to lose my family in that way. It took me years. Why? Because if I died today, people are coming to the funeral saying, this girl gave everything to everybody. My son says it every day. He says, Mom, that's why you're not going to have a life. You give everything to everybody. You're constantly looking for other people, And I was talking to an admissions counselor, because I didn't tell you this part, because that's the other part, which is I'm getting into integrative medicine, holistic medicine and stuff, because
that's so
it
dope.
is, it's another iteration of wellness for me. Right?
It is.
So
yeah.
I was telling him, I said, I wake up every day very clear that I am supposed to be of service to humanity.
Yeah.
That literally is it for me. I get up every day feeling pulled. It don't even matter if it's as small as I'm the only parent sitting on the porch, coming out with the snacks, coming out with the Gatorades, helping the kids maneuver and work through interpersonal dynamics as they are playing basketball or football. All the way to letting a dog go out there and play with other dogs, because I'm like, a dog got to play with dogs.
Yeah.
Talking to all the elders in the community, right? Like, it is as small as those types of acts, and as big as being people's first phone calls when they are having suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
And I believe that came with whatever I was given in this world to be on purpose, because I think all this work is on purpose for me. So the years I had to spend to both shed, I think, some of the onion off of myself, because I was holding a lot of weight, thinking, what did I do? And I am a reflective person. So I'm like, what did I do? Like, I didn't say nothing. I didn't do nothing. Like, and I think maybe after 2.5 years or so, I said, Lord, I'm going to have to lay this at your feet. I got to lay it down. And the reason I got to lay it down is because after racking my brain, I haven't done anything. And other people keep confirming I didn't do nothing. And so what this tells me is you're going to have to work your magic over there. You're going to have to do whatever you got to do over there. My door, my phone is always open. I won't harbor this feeling. I won't have animos or anxiety or any of that. If any of my siblings call me to this day, I'm picking up the phone. If there's a mortgage to be paid or a kid in trouble, I'm showing up. But what I can't do is force people to be more than what they are ready to be, and the time in which they are ready to do that.
That's the biggest part for my listeners is because you're in such a healthy place. I just want to say, like, it's powerful to be able to wake up and be clear on your purpose. And I know a lot of people are struggling with that, but I know it didn't come overnight. So I just want people to continue to grapple with it, because the things that we kind of ruminate on, our mind will help us look for evidence, right? And so I do believe that. So you're clear on your purpose. And another takeaway is that, when people have gone through things and you're on the other side, and it's not like you stop healing, you're still working.
That's right.
But you want to bring everybody with you. And of course, like, why wouldn't you want to bring your people with you? But because it's like, I'm out here helping everybody else. Of course, I want to help my family.
That's right.
First, like, let me start with but then it's kind of like being able to accept that sometimes family's not ready, and that's really hard. That's so hard for people to do.
You got to take a deep breath. I mean, for a while, I was even having to take cold showers in the morning. just to reset what I was feeling and where that trauma was all coming from and stuff, because again, I grew up in an environment where all we had was each other amongst a lot of violence and stuff. So there is a lot of detachment that has to happen emotionally also as you start to think about the loss. And some people say, well, they weren't for you, or, just because they blood doesn't make it so that's going to be your, full. And I'm like, right, heard. And there's something called bonding though. There's something that happens when people go through some things.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So I do have to release. But you had asked me about, sort of how I got into the work. And the truth is, I've always been headed into this work.
Yeah.
From the time that being a kid, talking about that ain't right, don't do that.
Yeah.
And that's my son. Are y'all all right? Because I was never a victim of the physical violence. It was my older siblings that were.
Oh.
And so my trigger had always been about what I was witnessing in terms of injustices for other people and all the things.
Oh, wow.
Then I get through college, come to the East Coast, immediately got involved with nonprofits that were social justice leaning, LGBTQ justice leaning, environmentally justice leaning. And I knew that I always needed to work in people work. So what I do, I go become a chief administrative officer. I'm working in HR and finance.
Wow.
Okay. And then people say, well, what made you do that? I said, well, because there was two things that afflicted, my lifestyle growing up. One was people not checking to make sure my parents were okay and therefore we were okay. Two was without the money, people can't be okay because to live here in the world, we need money. Yeah. And so when you're talking about people being disproportionately paid or not paid equally, or there's some sabotage stuff going on behind closed doors, now I want to be the person to look and to say, wait a minute.
Wow.
What you doing around here? And so I had taken it upon myself to specifically be involved and to care about what's going on with Black and brown people when they pay. Wow. What's going on with the discipline within the organization. So again, it was the same thing from when I was a kid. And now I'm transferring it into an organization saying, I got to care about these people because who's looking for them? In a room full of Caucasian board members or EDs or whatever it is, they're not even acknowledging their own biases. So yes, I see that even I, as a person who came in with a double master's experience, is getting paid $20,000 less than a director who never went to college a day in her life, but because she's white. She's got a different experience in the world. So then I said, no, girl, you're going to have to put some work in. You're going to give it back to the world. Let's use them degrees and let's go help some folk out. Right. And I used to say, I got to save us one day at a time. I got to go look for us everywhere I go. I got to do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I kept finding the same thing. Then I realized I'm not in love with finance. Now that took me 2 years before I was like, I know that's where the money is attached to this job. I don't like this work because I'm also an ADHD person in the world. So I'm also walking around with this invisible special ability. And I'm like, that's giving me anxiety. And I'm like, how I feel. So I don't want to do that anymore. I said, let me get into more of the HR experience because what I do love is working with people. Yeah. I love seeing the lights go off. I love being able to rectify tension before it explodes and people start losing jobs and stuff. I also love, offboarding people who got to go that are toxic to other people and stuff, right? Like I'm here for all those personal experiences. Mm-hmm. And that led me both nationally. I took it internationally because I was like, these goons keep talking about we being all progressive and liberal and taking care of folk. Meanwhile, I was seeing that they were doing stuff that was worse than even other folks. And I said, let me go and see how the rest of the world is living. Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, come back. And now all of a sudden my call to action is, how come these men don't have paternity leave? Why they got to be out of the kids' lives? These kids need these guys around, especially if they want to be around it. So then I'm going on this whole thing around, and I got to fix the policies and I got to evangelize these things and normalize this because my communities that, look like us, cousins, all the things, we are impacted by these types of things when our family units are broken up in this way. And stuff. And that moved me to, oh my God, I'm doing all this coaching, all this mentoring. These guys are not okay. Yeah. They're not okay. And the more and more I was doing coaching and mentoring within that HR envelope, the more I was like loudly hearing the world be like, but are you on the organizational side or are you on the people side? Because it used to be that HR was organizational leaning and the people, as long as you was doing what you had to do, we take care of you too. But within a couple of years, I realized that I'm not a person who leans towards entities. I'm a person who leans towards humanity, people. Yeah. And that was coming through with the advice I was given. I was talking people out of jobs and stuff. You don't want to work here. You're crying every day. You know, and the employer's like, that's not what we paid you for. We paid
Because
you.
you're looking at the person. Yeah.
But it's like, but I can't tell her to stay here when
Yeah.
she's crying every day.
Right.
That's
Right.
not me being committed to her growth and to her being able to thrive.
Yeah.
This is her surviving and you winning. And that don't work for me. The dynamics don't work. So
Yeah.
I started then rolling out wellness retreats because I was like, well, I can't do it within the organizational, structure because they matter.
Wow.
So now I'm gonna create this retreat and I'm gonna hope that some people take a leap of faith on me.
What year did you start that?
We started doing retreats 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
2.5 years ago. And we had a cohort of people who came through. 50% I sponsored. So of the infrastructure, finance, HR consulting I was doing, I took half of that money and poured it back into our people.
Wow.
Because I was like, there's no way that this Black woman, this Black man, this brown person, there's no way they should be feeling like this. And if they can't afford it and the orgs won't pay for it, I'm going to figure this out for them. Wow. We have our first cohort, and I didn't think twice about it. I'm like, I want to teach you about all the pillars of wellness. You got to know, because if you don't feel good, but you are fit, you eat healthy, and you're still blue, you still feel unsatisfied, we got some talking to do.
Yeah.
We got some shedding to do, right? We got some things that we got to go through. So I started taking people through that. In the midst of the retreats, I started doing personality profiling. Because the other thing I realized was people don't know themselves.
No, yeah.
They don't know themselves. They don't know why this person don't like them. Well, let me figure out how y'all talking to each other, how you interacting with each other. Maybe they're your kryptonite. I mean, I found out from my own personality profile that I don't deal well with narcissists, but I found out a lot of us don't.
Yeah.
So now when I see them coming, I'm like, okay. Now I got tools to be like, don't let them get too close and don't take that personal, right? Like that's a
right. When you know yourself, you could be mindful when you're in certain spaces.
Right. Yeah. So we started doing that, and then I was like, okay, let's get them journaling. Let's ask them questions. Write a love note to yourself. I want to know how much you love yourself. Write it. And we were having people with basic things start falling apart. And we were like, what is going on? These questions weren't that deep, but they were. Because you were asked to write yourself a love letter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so then that started just unfolding all kinds of stuff to where we started reaching out to sound therapists and regular therapists. And then we were like, some of these people just need to have a good time. They just need community. Let's go create a bunch of fun stuff for them to do as we're unpeeling these onions, right? Because if you're going to open it up, we got to know how to bring it back in so folks don't get so traumatized. And after that first cohort, people were swearing by it. Rikimah, you need to do this more and more. And I'm scared, right? Because I had been told a couple years before then, you need to start laying your hands on people. Now, a little bit about my background. I come from faith healers.
Okay.
The women in our family have all been faith healers, priests, pastors, medicine women even.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of that that's been interwoven, I think, into our DNA in general.
Yeah.
So someone had said, you're going to have to start laying hands soon. And I says, no, I won't. Well, why not? Because I still haven't learned how to release people's energy.
Yeah, that's huge.
I said, I have to sleep for 3 weeks after these retreats. I am like out.
Yeah.
And I said, my work for myself is that I have to learn to release and to let all this energy out so that so I don't end up consuming this energy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because we've had that in our family also. And so after those retreats and stuff, I started writing books. Then I started doing more and more coaching. And then I had a moment. I woke up out of my sleep one day and I said, Rikimah, you're not going to keep running from this. You're not going to keep running from this. You're going to have to figure out how to feed yourself and do the work that's on purpose. If you're supposed to be sitting with people, if you're supposed to be telling your story, sharing your story, if you are supposed to be walking in this journey alongside with people, then you're going to have to go ahead and take a leap of faith on that because it can't get louder than this. I mean, loud.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Even so much so, like I said early on, now I'm getting ready to go for a PhD in integrative holistic medicine and stuff because I'm like, I want to not just stop with the traditional wellness. I also want to say, let's get back to the basics.
Yeah.
Talk about what we're pouring into our bodies. Let's talk about environmental things. Let's talk about, but from another perspective also. So the sharpening of tools in the toolbox, right?
Yeah.
In preparation for what I see coming and what I know is coming.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. I want to acknowledge the fact that all these things you were doing being in white spaces as a Black woman, because you talked about doing it, but I work with a lot of Black women, and I know it's not easy to go into those spaces and proclaim. And I also want to just say really quick about the spirituality piece, because you know how earlier you was like, yeah, when I was like 10, 9, I was saying all these things. And there's something powerful about our lineage and how things are passed on. I think especially as Black people, we don't realize how much has been stripped away from us or has tried to be stripped away. And sometimes you may feel things and I know for me, since I was younger, I've always been very wise. And I can't name like, oh, this person helped me. Like I can't, it was something that was innately in me. And even when I work with people, when I originally started working with people and I would say things, it's like, oh my God, I was just thinking that, or blah, blah, blah. It used to freak me out. I ain't gonna lie. And then I started now it's like so normal, right? Like, I'm like, yeah, like, I was like, whether you believe in God or the universal spirit, I said, I feel like I'm an agent where,
That's right.
because there are times where I'll get on and I'm talking to somebody and I'm just like in my head, like, oh my God, how am I going to help this person? But I know it's going to be fine. Like I don't feel overwhelmed or anxious because I always find the right things to say. And I always tell people I'm not a genius. Like I swear I'm not that smart, but when it comes to, I said, he was like, I got to make you green, like down in the other areas. Cause this area, you're going to be really strong in. And so that's my gift. And
I love that.
I learned to embrace it. At one point, I didn't want it. I was like, yo, why can't I just be like
Right.
Like I didn't go the route of trying to be because I already know I couldn't. I was like, why can't I just do that? And I just feel like it's like, yo, you can't. Like, why are you even tripping? So I just get over it. I'll have my moments because it's energy transfer. But I definitely instead of allowing myself to go down that rabbit hole of this is hard, I do the things I need to do to take care of myself so I can give myself what I need because I understand my purpose. And that's something that's so powerful. So I just want to name that for people that may feel like they have gifts that they've never really tapped into. You probably do. And don't continue to pay attention to it, write it down, because the gifts are real. But in America, we are such a capitalistic society, even with Rikimah going into this integrative medicine piece. These are the things she's basically just doing, like she said, the basics, doing things that have always been available, but we've been stripped away from because it's hard to capitalize on natural environments. It's hard to, you're not going to see a commercial that says, oh, are you struggling with sleep? What's your stress level like? What are you eating? Nobody's going to do that.
That's right.
Who's going to get paid from that? So you're not going to have mainstream media kind of talking about these basic wellness needs that we need. So as a Black woman being in all these spaces, how are you able to handle yourself where you didn't find, there are people that go into deep depression and taking FMLA because they're being gaslit by these corporations. Like, what would you say to people that are in the space that you are, where they know something's not right, or, and they're not, they're struggling with that?
Yeah. I mean, and I will say, when I first bumped into it, it only felt similar or it felt familiar because of my experience at UCLA. I felt like, as much as I hated that experience, right? I mean, thankful for the degree, hated the experience. I felt like it was getting me prepared for what I then ran into, right? Which was still a shock to my system because I also wasn't raised with the idea that the world was so racist. And
Me
so
neither.
I have older sisters who are half white, right? Like we were a very mixed environment and stuff. So coming out of California where, you see a lot of mixing and stuff like that. And then being thrown into a university that thinks that 1% Black people is enough out of 40,000 people. And then coming, into the work environment where almost every boss I've ever had never had the degrees, never was qualified, but hired me to save their jobs and then dared me to think I could do more than that, right? And what I'll say to people is, listen, when we work for other people, sometimes we have to take a deep breath and remember that we're not in charge. And so, depending on the role you in, right? It's either I'm going to say the thing, but I recognize there will be consequences, and so I've already set myself up to land on my feet. And which way, however way this goes, right? There, I can't even tell you how many times I picked up the phone and told my dad, I'm probably about to get fired. Why, Rikimah? Because I said, why you being racist like this? Why you treating people like this? And because I've always been that kind of truth teller, my dad is like, so did you already start applying for other jobs? Did when I got to a point where I had just simply had enough, because I said, look, Rikimah, for 15 years, you've been looking for your people. You've been trying to get people paid more. You've even helped people resign and still get severance. That was my whole thing. I'm like, reparations, let's get you some severance, right? Because it's going to take you twice as long to get a job because you don't look like these guys, right? Like, and so that's the other thing we're aware of. But when I had got to a point where I had enough, there was a question mark for me about, are you going to go work for another institution or not? And I struggled with the idea of going back into another organization, because the truth is even the groups that call themselves liberals are still latent with this bias that sometimes is unconscious, but a lot of times is conscious. And they are hiding behind the guise of, but what? We trying to legalize marijuana, but what? We got 50%, folk of color up.
Yeah.
And then it's like, right, but you wonder why your retention rate sucks. And you wonder why people are bad mouthing you guys. So, sometimes we're in environments where leaders are apt and ready to hear what we have to say, and they want to be better people.
Yeah.
I'm not finding that there's tons of those types of people, because then we run into ego, and then we run into fear, and then so there's all these other layers that show up, even if a person is willing to hear you out.
Yeah.
So I am a fan of still speaking truth. I am a fan of remembering discernment.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of being a wordsmith. How I'm saying things. It's not what I'm saying, it's how I'm going to say it to you. I may not call you a flat out racist, but I am going to inquire about why was that human treated so differently. Judy, I've never seen you do that before. What happened there? Why did they get such a stark different, approach from you?
Yeah.
Right? And I am going to question it, because I need Judy to know that I saw it also.
Yeah.
Right? And, I also don't put all my eggs in nobody's basket. Because the truth is, as Black folks, we have a long past of being entrepreneurial and having our markets and our vegetable stands and our this and our that. And so like the idea of like reaching for cultural imponderables and saying, no, I come from a strong people who have all these skills, who are hustlers. Like we know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. This is what we do. So, the idea of thinking about, do I have to only have this job, or can I have this job? Can I do a little bit of consulting on the side? Can I pick up some sort of gig that just is to keep some additional money in? Can I think about how I'm using money, right? If I'm a young Black person and I'm already seeing it, I've heard it, I've got mentors who have spoken to it. What am I doing with the money before I end up with a full-blown family where I don't have a lot of loose money? Am I investing it? Am I working with a financial advisor to make sure that I am stretching that money out? Maybe I'm going to write a book, because I know in 10 years, some of those proceeds will help me out later also. Right? So that's the zone I found myself in, where I was like, you have got to diversify where money comes from, because at any drop of a hat, the money can stop. You can be fired, you can walk away, you can do all the things. And have an agency to be able to choose for myself what was comfortable, what wasn't comfortable, who I could tolerate, who I absolutely couldn't, because you were just terrible. That took the idea of me turning blue away, because I didn't feel stuck. To create those options.
So what I'm hearing Rikimah say for my audience members, which I truly believe in, because I left nonprofit, I realized I was putting Band-Aids on things back in 2015 when mental health wasn't popular, being in private practice wasn't, literally because of the same reasons, but also I created a plan. I always tell people I still had a per diem job when I stepped out, because you have all these podcasts. It was like, oh, quit your job and do this, right? And so it took me being demoted in order to realize I was disposable. That was a wake up call for me. I'm somebody that looks at signs, and I realized I was what's the word I'm trying to find? that my job is disposable, like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and so I created a plan, right? So that's the thing, that literally what Rakim is saying is the message I tell the people. It's like, okay, we're going to recognize that this really sucks and your hands are tied, but don't get stuck and think, and you need to start creating a plan, looking at the full wheel, the full wellness wheel, and thinking about what your needs are. Because a lot of times it's not that we don't know what to do. It's just that when we get into that space, we can, if flight or fight comes in, some of the old stuff that's happened before, and you forget, like, oh no, I'm a 40-year-old woman and I have this and I have that. You really can forget because the emotions come fluttering in, and it gets you into the place of, oh my goodness, like what's happening?
Yeah. That's right. Or complacency, right? I meet people every day who's like, it's easy to be here, even though I'm crying every day. You like, but at what cost, sis? You gonna die from a heart attack or something? Like, you trying to give yourself
literally.
Right? Like, what are we doing? And I literally talk to people like that. Ma'am, how long do you think you got before you get sick? Like, we are dying at record highs. Like, we can't afford to lose you. Like, and so then it gets into the worthy conversations though. And then it trickles into the sort of value conversation, right? You asked me about values. And every time I'm coaching and mentoring, I swear, I am always starting from a place of how you feel about yourself. What's going on? Because almost 95% of the time, people's ability to activate or to say, I'm not going to wait till you fire me. I'm going to go get something set up. I'm not waiting. I'm not that complacent, right? I believe that I got this, right? So many people will tell you, because I don't believe that. I don't believe I have it, right? And that comes from a lot of childhood stuff that they still have to work through. So people will hear me yell, do your work. Who are you waiting on?
Yeah.
You have got to heal. You've got to do that work, because if you don't, you will find in 10 years from now, you're going to be running in place.
Yeah.
I had to go through forgiveness of these people I was surrounded by.
Yeah.
I had to let go of things I could not control. And I had to literally sit with myself and say, Rikimah, but you ain't alone. So go on and call that spirituality out. Don't be afraid if people think you weird.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times people say, how do you know? And now I'm like very vocal about it. Well, I read people for a living. And actually, it's a major gift. It used to scare me, but that's why I've been so good at my job for so long. Like, it's a thing, right? And you see the looks. But I say, listen, I got to own it. I got to speak and manifest on certain things. And I have to believe that whatever is for me is going to be for me. But I've got to stand in those principles and those values. And I have to say, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I have to keep reminding myself that authenticity is critical in my world. And that, and that being able to be honest and direct and compassionate also, but honest. Is a critical core, value for me in the way that I have to move in this world.
Yeah. And I want that for everybody. But before we get out of here, I just want to pull this up really quick. And the reason why, like, I mean, you just talked about values, and I did want to bring this into the conversation really quick. So this is Rikimah's company, Be Well 365. I love it. I have a book called 365 Days of Intentional Living, because I think it's a journal, and I just think it's so important for us to think about wellness in a like daily thing, not like, oh, Friday's here and I have the weekend or vacations coming up. Like, no, like that's not, there's 365 days. A week of vacation is not it. Okay.
That's right.
So we have an idea on what we want to be true for ourselves, but we don't understand the values. Can you go through these 3 core values that you have on your website? And for people that are listening to this, bewell365.org, you can find her website and everything there.
Yeah, I mean, intentional, right? We've been talking about that this whole time, which is, making sure that you are intentional about the journey you're going on. Don't just, to your point, don't just say Friday here, I guess I better get back to this work. No, every day we're working at this, and by the way, you're never going to be perfect at all of these items, which is the reason why it is a continual experience for the rest of forever, right? So be intentional. Understand that when you're going into this, you are saying, I'm choosing me. I am choosing me. I'm choosing to be well because without me being well, my kids can't be well. My partner won't be well. My job journey won't be well. My spirit won't be well. Those around me won't be well, right? Like we are not just on our own. We impact everybody's lives around us, also, whether we want to accept this or not, right? Intersectional, all of these things fit into each other. If my mind is not okay, a lot of things are not okay, right? The same way that if my son is not okay at school, I'm not okay. The same way as if my neighbor just told me she was going through domestic violence, I ain't all right because my neighbor's not all right either. Right. Like, so there's so many parts that are intersectional in terms of how things impact this thing or the next thing. Right. Be intentional about where you place yourself, but be intentional about understanding that everything connects. Nothing is on its own. It's all connecting in one way or another. I told, one of one of the young ladies that I coach had said, Rikimah, like, I'm just having headaches. I don't even know if I want to stay on this job. Like, I don't know. I just have been feeling tense. And I'm saying, okay, you talking about what's going on with your mind, but look at what you also just said. Look at your body. And then look what you also just said. And your two kids get to watch you like this. And so then how is it impacting these guys, right? And then also, if you're so unwell, at what point are we going to worry about our financial wellness? To which then, how many people does that impact? Because most of us taking care of multiple families and stuff, So just remembering that. And then the other one is just restorative, right? And that we are trying to build these skills so that we can restore our systems, restore our way of being, restore our ability of being our full selves in terms of what you said, which is, are we living out all the things that we were meant to be living out while we were here on this planet? My dad just asked me, why are you going back to school? Because I got more purpose going on. I got things to do. I'm telling you, I'm not asking. I'm informing you.
Yeah.
It's not a negotiation or a conversation. I've already talked to my dad.
You're good.
I've already had that. I've been sitting with this decision for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But the idea is just remembering also that we have got to restore. And so, the more we go towards being well, the more we continue to pour in ourselves, the more we are restoring the things that have left us, which is like our ability to be at peace, our ability to thrive, right? And so on and so forth.
And, it speaks to, I think, community and how we all play a part in the world. And I think a lot of times, I know that in this country, they make things as individualistic. You're failing because you're not doing enough in this. And there's a lot of systems at play that I don't think we realize. There's a lot of ways that we're affected. You just gave an example. If my neighbor's this, or if this is happening, we don't even realize how things around us are playing a role. The example that Rikimah gave about the headache, unfortunately, I hear those all the time, and people have come to normalize it and pop a Tylenol where it's like, no, like, let's talk about what's going on. I'm realizing a pattern. The headaches are happening when X, Y, and Z goes on. Like, we're so divorced from our bodies, and because we had to survive, right? And younger, it was easier for us to like separate ourselves because we didn't have no other choice. But now that we're adults, we really have to take our power back and get back in tune with our bodies, because our bodies are giving us signs that we're not okay. And when those moments happen, as uncomfortable as they are for me, I'm like, you know what? Thank you for taking care of me. Thank you for the ability to understand that, like, I'm having a hard time, right? Growing up and feeling different pains in my back, not recognizing that was a sign for me, right? Until I got older and I got more in touch with my body. And I'm not saying it was a pretty journey into that space, but I'm saying right now, and coming on the other side, it's beautiful to be able to like acknowledge those moments and have the awareness in real time. That a lot of people don't. And a lot of the, remembering the medical system here is to treat the symptoms, not to get to the root of the problem. So that when you're having these autoimmune issues or inflammation or headaches, and they're going to try to figure out how to make you okay, not to figure out why is this coming and how do we prevent it from coming.
That's
right.
right.
So I just want people to be clear on what's happening, because we put sometimes people put a lot of
faith.
trust and faith in the systems here, but you got to understand, you're putting faith in a system that wasn't designed for you to be well 365. It was designed to keep the economy going,
That's
right?
right. And also, like, just for them to remember, like, sometimes we uncover stuff that we're uncomfortable with,
Yeah.
right? On those journeys, when we start asking ourselves those harder questions about different areas of our wellness experience, we stumble into stuff. I was just confessing to my son, maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago or so. We were talking about how we have to walk the walk. We don't get to just espouse these things. People need to see us in action. We need to be in action in order for authenticity to live here, right? And I was telling him, I said, son, I had a weird issue. I've been avoiding this one part of the wellness wheel for a long time. And I knew I was avoiding it, right? Like, we know. And I said, the physical part of the wellness wheel, chucked it out the window. That years ago, though, okay? And I said, it's only recently that I realized what it was tied to. Something traumatic happened to me in college that now has paid dividends well past college. We're talking 20 years past college. And now I'm having to undo these things because I decided not to deal with it when it was happening. Speeding between the last 5 years, doctors want to say, why don't you take this medicine? We think this is what's going on. Why don't you take that medicine? We think you in perimenopause, like all these things.
They're not asking any questions deeper. They're just
no, because if they had asked, I would have said no. But something happened here that is manifesting here. And I now have to do that work.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Tears and all. I got to do the work. And then I have to start speaking truth to power about what it is that took me by surprise. Because even those of us who are practitioners are still on the journey.
Yeah, I just want that to be clear. Like, I always tell people that because I think people look up to me and how I operate. But I say I have a very traumatic background. And
that's right.
There's moments that I'm triggered, but now I'm able to thank God for the awareness. And I want to say, to your point, because when I'm talking to people, the first session, I hear their story and I hear what they're going through, and I have this ability to help them make the connection. And they'll be like, but that was 20 years ago. And I'll be like, okay.
Right.
It was an experience, right? And it's kind of like, it's not like rocket science, but because we're not brought up to think about it that deeply, because when something happens, let's throw them a dance, let's do this so they can forget about it.
That's
How
right.
do you forget about what you experience? And then people think like, dang, that's true. And because we're so uncomfortable with vulnerability, especially in the Black community, we want to pray everything away and pretend like things are not praying is fine, but
that's right.
We want to not do the work. Faith without works is dead, right? And so I just think about the importance of those things that you may have thought when I think about substance use, any kind of thing people are struggling with, people are trying to escape pain.
Absolutely.
And you can never escape part of yourself because you're going to lose the other part. So whether it's working, food, addiction, whatever it is, I have a lot of empathy for people because I recognize they're trying to escape pain, not realizing you can't escape your experience.
That's right.
So the most powerful thing I was able to do was face it. It was very hard.
Yeah.
But it no longer had power over me. I gave it power and I made a conscious choice because I can choose to deal with it and I can choose not to. But I can tell you now, I don't regret the choice to deal with it. Right. Because now in 2024, I have power. And 2004, I didn't think having power was a thing to have. I didn't know that existed. But it did require me doing work. And as Rikimah says, we still do work, but it's not the same. It's more kind of we're practicing it. Right. And then when those moments come up, we're able to acknowledge it. And it's not as heavy as it was before. It's heavy, but it doesn't feel like it's taken over our lives,
That's right. And like I said, just for people to just know we're on our journey. My son tells me all the time, and when we have the retreats, people look at me crazy. You should just see them. They'd be like, what'd she just say? I'm like, listen, I may have a lot of things worked out, my brain. And I feel like a lot of that is coming from all these places.
Yeah.
And I am still a human person who is on a journey, who is still trying to work through her things.
Yes.
Also just trying to make sure that as I'm learning, I'm sharing. Because the worst thing that I could be doing is keeping all those nuggets of power to myself and not sharing that with the world.
And I can't imagine I can't imagine keeping things to myself. I think that it's so important for us to, like, the more we know, to share. And I love it when I hear people say, I was telling my cousin about this and that, and they're now looking into therapy or whatever it is. Like, I think it's beautiful to keep sharing. For people that want to learn more, so you do have 2 books out. One of them is Total Wellness, that you can find on Amazon. You can find on her website, bewell365.org. I just love the 365 because you're not talking about a temporary wellness. Um, and you also have another book, Love Notes, that you created. Tell people about that process.
Yeah. So the book of Love Notes is for Black women. That book is on Amazon. So you wouldn't see it here necessarily, but you will see it on Amazon. And literally, that is a book of affirmations. It is a book of affirmations. It is all the things I wish that someone had said to me while I was coming up. And it is segmented for, women coming through the projects. Why? Because that was my experience. It is segmented for, women in the work environment. It's segmented for folks who are in relationships, right? Like, so the idea is that because there are so many things that we go through on a day-to-day basis, sometimes we need to pick me up. Right. And we don't all have family, right? I talked earlier about not really having family, not because I don't want it, but because of the way the world trickled in. Right. And so if you are someone like that, right, or if you're someone that doesn't necessarily feel as inclined to share, but you do need some positive, affirmations or whatever, that book is for you. So the idea is to uplift us and to say the things that we wish we would hear, even in the work environment. It's like, why is it so hard for y'all to tell us that we're doing a great job? Why, right? Like, it's for y'all to tell us that, but for whatever reason, the more and more Black women that I congregate, community with, and talk to, you hear it. There's no positive. There's always constructive feedback present.
Yeah.
This sort of build you up experience, right? I was working on a presidential campaign, and one of a former senator, Black woman, said to me, she said, Rikimah, don't matter how high up you get. Doesn't matter how high up you get. It's the same. You never hear it. You never hear it. And she really was a catalyst for me because I said, well, dang, I'm just an admin, but you a whole senator type. And you are still 2 things, still looking for it and still can't get it.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want us to keep looking for it. I want us
to ourselves. Yeah.
Right. You nobody patting you on the back, pat yourself on the back.
Yes.
Right.
The validation, I say the validation is an added bonus. When I started in this field, like, I had a passion for mental health and sharing it as I started to be okay. Like, I just wanted to share with the world, and I didn't have money or anything, but I just started sharing quotes on social media. And people was like, why are you doing that? Or blah, blah, blah. But it didn't matter because I was grounded in the fact that, like, I know this is for people. And now, 15 years later, it's like so normalized. I get validation and praise. But if I tell people, if I waited for validation and praise, I wouldn't be at this step now. I would have been like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm supposed to be just praying and keeping it in the house. I ain't supposed to be sharing.
It's true. And for some of us, we get praise from the outside world, but never from the ones who are directly close to us.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the reality.
And so I think, the idea of getting used to praising yourself, though, patting yourself on the back, making sure you look in the mirror and say, girl, you fierce. I tell my son all the time, I say, son, I want you looking in that mirror and reminding yourself just how intelligent you are, how smart you are, how good looking you are, how athletic you are, how much promise you have. Because that's who you are, whether you believe it today or not. I need to hear you saying it regularly until you start to believe it.
Yeah.
What we all see.
Because we could walk around with a bully or a motivator. And I'm always telling my clients, like, are you proud of yourself? It's interesting how they go from like they hesitate and then to the point of like, you know what, I'm proud of myself. And I'd be like, yes, because I could tell you all day, but when you telling yourself, because I'm not with you all day, we get 45, 50 minutes a week and you with yourself 24/7, I need that voice to be loud and proud no matter what space you step into.
That's right. And that's for big wins and little wins.
Yeah.
Some weeks I don't get to everything on my to-do list. Heck, some days I wake up and I'm unmotivated altogether. And the truth is, I say, but you got up, but you made that bed, but you made sure you forgot about this door. You try again tomorrow.
Yes.
Right. And this time, reduce your list because clearly you have energy this week, and that's okay too.
And
right?
that's okay. Yeah.
So give yourself permission also,
Yeah.
especially when you are depleted, when
Yeah.
your mind is all over the place and stuff. Because I think sometimes we also don't give ourselves permission.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? Like we are both looking for someone else to give it to us, but we won't give it to ourselves. I think it comes out of a history of being told how lazy we are and stuff
Yep.
like that, you know?
Yep.
But the truth is like, you know, you could be as lazy as you want to be, you know? But I don't know if I call that laziness more so than I think the
I
body
need rest.
and you need to listen, right? Because when you pass out, the job is just going to get another cog in the wheel.
All day, sipping their coffee, like, oh yeah, she's gone. That's
Meanwhile,
it.
your kids suffer. Meanwhile, your partners suffer. Meanwhile, those who care about you that may not be connected by blood, they suffer. You know. Meanwhile, you're not here no more. And so you're not suffering, but you ain't here. And did you plan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, needless to say, I do think they need to celebrate the small ones too.
Yes.
You know, today I did have that day. Today I had exactly the day I just said.
Yeah.
I feel like doing too much of nothing. I barely want to walk the dog.
I know.
I'm looking at Fido like, I'm sorry, Fido. Mama's not feeling up to it today. But I got up and I said, what I did feel like doing was working out though, because I know that I'm on a journey with my physical. Remember, we talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
So there was a commitment I made to myself once I realized what had happened.
Yeah.
But Rikimah, you now have to start stilling that powder bag. You have to start telling yourself that you're worthy of this too.
Yep.
Not all the other stuff that comes easy, because other stuff comes easy to you.
Yeah.
This is going to be the thing for you. Let's do it.
I love that. This was such a fruitful conversation. I appreciate it. So many nuggets for people to take away. Tell people if they want to work with you or learn more about you or reach out to you. How could they do that?
Yeah, so they can always look me up. I'm across all of LinkedIn. Even if you look up at the bewell365.org, there's a contact us button there as well. And so people can reach me there also. But yeah.
And you work with companies. She works with companies, individuals, just to take a more holistic approach. I appreciate you and your time. When we started, I said, how you doing? She said, tired. I love, like, you know, I think we so used to say, fine, thank you. Like, oh, when she said tired, I was like, oh, she's really into her wellness. Like, I already know when people don't give me the fine, thank you. Like, we're not always walking around here fine, and it's okay that we're not fine. I was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So thank you so much. This is such a good conversation. I'm so grateful for you.
No,